Thank you for coming, guys. Good afternoon. I know this might look funny, I'm holding a mic because we're having a live feed. So once again, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I would like to welcome you to this presentation. It's really a unique topic, but it's only fitting considering the timing and the Valentine's Day weekend. This seminar is being organized by Sikhi Research Institute, which is an educational organization focused on community development through education. And I think you guys are aware of their activities, the civic program, Soji Gurmat curriculum. But some of the new things coming out are e-learning programs, a Gurbani workbook. So I highly encourage the audience, if you're interested, to please go on the website and really with a very different and fresh approach, learning techniques coming out with the changing environment. A few words about our speaker. Harinder Singh has been with Sikh Research Institute since inception, almost 12 years ago. He is the CEO and co-founder of SRI, and by training, he's actually an aerospace engineer and worked for several years after getting his master's in engineering management. But then he's dedicated his life for the last 17 years for upliftment of the Sikh community to internal development. And he spent, early on, he spent 5 years in Punjab working with Fateh organization, and then he's been involved in Sikh Research Institute for the last 12 years. He's a writer, he's a awesome orator, but more than anything, when I think of him, I think of somebody who pushes for continuous success and outcomes in whatever spectrum of Sikhi. And today, I would ask him to really enlighten us, educate us on the idea of love according to Sikhi. We all have our interpretation, or perhaps our thoughts of how we are bombarded with that message of love, or what we perceive to be love. But what does Gurbani say about love? And what are according to our history, Sikh history, who are some of the peoples who actually did play this game of love? And how did they do that? Where did they get the inspiration from? But most importantly for us, the message is, how did they choose to spend their time, energy, and resources? So we can integrate that into our own lifestyle at the end of the day. A few logistical stuff. So this is we're programmed. He's going to speak for about 1 hour. Afterwards, we're going to have 20 minutes of Q&A sessions. And I would like to remind the audience that there's a live feed on the radio. Those of you who are more visual people but cannot be here, the video will be posted on the website and YouTube as well. Some logistical stuff, if you have to get out of the room, if you get a phone call, please put your phones on vibrate, take it outside. The restrooms are on your left-hand side when you get out. And I'm asking him primarily speak in English, except when he gives us quotes from Gurbani. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Prithpal Singh. Good afternoon, and Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. As he mentioned, the topic, as you can also see, is it's all about love. But you know, one of the things which might come to your mind is when people talk about love, there is a whole debate about this word, because the word, you know, in English invokes various feelings. We use a phrase, "I love my mom," but we also say, "I love my car." And obviously they're very two different things, two different feelings. So there's a debate in the religious arena. What does this word really mean? Catholic Church is the one actually which decided that February 14th is the Valentine's Day. And you might not even, maybe you're aware of it, but they mostly talk about their liturgical, which basically means the kind of reasons they came up with to call it a Valentine's Day is it has to do with violating the laws of the land. Priests who used to get soldiers married because the state wouldn't allow them because they needed to go to war. So they have those legends and stories why this day started, and they also have ideas of martyrdom being celebrated on that day. Now, when you come to the 20th century phenomena of love, the whole 60s revolution produced another phrase called free love, which has a very different spectrum, which means people who are anti-institutional ideas of love, which would mean this whole sexual revolution we call them, this whole ideas about sexuality and romance which come into it. And obviously in the last 30 years, you can see the chocolate industry has totally owned this, and I guess Hallmark cards are the ones who own this. So love idea invokes various feelings. Now when we come to Sikh arena, it's the same thing. Yeah, in Gurdwaras, the words will get used, for the love are preet, prem, sometimes ishq, but with a very caution, unless it's a Gurbani line. You watch Hollywood or Bollywood or Lollywood or whichever movies you watch, the word gets invoked quite a bit as well. In fact, these days it is readily accepted to not be confined to particular idea of even human love. So, extramarital affairs and premarital and LGBTQ, everything is out there, right? So, in this sort of a reality of 2014, for those of us who are wanting to figure out how do I practice my love, if I want to learn from Sikh inspiration, what is love in Sikhi? We have various religious traditions telling us what is love. We have, Romeo and Juliet and Leonardo DiCaprio telling us what is love. There is, philosophical things. You name it. We are bombarded with ideas of love and some visualizations of that in songs and the movies. So what is love for me? What is love for you? Well, I'm not going to get into all of those things because for that you have Mr. and Mrs. Google, and if you own iPods, you can download anything and listen to those ideas. The agenda today is how do we look at all these options and what does Sikhi offer, popularly Sikhism, in this debate of love. So the basic debate is world has classified certain things as being sacred and certain things as being profane. That some ideas are good and some ideas are bad. Now, where do we come into this picture? What is sacred love? Is human love sacred? Because a lot of the churches and religious personalities throughout the world actually do have issues with even human love. This is why in both Eastern and Western traditions, you'll see demarcations of even some of the Punjabi Sikh communities, when they say a biraktne, which essentially means unmarried, because somehow being married makes you less spiritual. Those ideas do exist in both Eastern and Western traditions. What does Sikhi have to say in all these things? From a physical level of love, which is sort of what most people were celebrating yesterday probably, and then there is a trans-physical, you can say, or metaphysical if you're philosophical about it. How do we look at both of these things? And that's what I want to talk about. What do we have to look at these ideas from? So we'll explore the idea of love a little bit. Anything I do like to start with the etymology of things, because sometimes the meanings change over time. The connotations definitely change. For example, the word discrimination. If I say today, today most people will say it has a very negative connotation. Unless you're a scientist in a lab, then discriminating agent just means something which is different. So connotations do change. As I mentioned, even the connotation of love has changed. So what is love in its conception and what is love in Sikhi? We'll get into that. I will touch briefly on obviously ideas from Gurbani for sure in Guru Granth Sahib, because this is where the basic conception of love is for Sikhs, but also people who we feel were lovers. What does Guru Nanak think about a lover? Who is a lover? Because when we use these words in English, in Punjabi, sometimes there's a cultural sensitivity to these things. And as soon as you say lover, people get a little bit, traditionalists especially, what are you trying to say? Well, that's the word Guru Nanak also uses. He uses the word ishq, which is love. He uses the word ashaks, which are lovers. So how do we make sense of all this? I'm not going to tell you here, it is not my place to tell you the limits and the boundaries and what kind of love to practice. That's for all of you to decide. I'm just going to offer some ideas which are offered in Sikh culture. And some of them might not be popular things, but some of them might even surprise you, because what we see among certain levels of Sikhs these days might not be what is reflected in Guru Granth Sahib, for example. So let me start out with, those of you who know me, I always love to use Professor Puran Singh's ideas because he's the original interpreter of Sikhi, in English at least. And this is what he writes. He says, in Guru Granth, love is not any philosophical abstraction. It is an incessant breathing of the Spirit of God and a life informed of universal sympathy. First thing, and again, he's saying love in Guru Granth Sahib. So Guru Granth Sahib is a scriptural canon of the Sikhs, which means if there are 27 million Sikhs in the world right now, this is the only thing they agree on. Everything else we fight about, which means this is a very powerful idea. And the most powerful idea he's talking about, that in Guru Granth Sahib, love is not something of philosophy. It is not an abstraction. It is not something which we sit over sipping lattes and discuss only. Yeah, because those are the ideas, things which are born out of certain coffee cultures or certain tea cultures or whatever else you want to call it. In the Eastern traditions, in the Hindustani traditions, they used to have baithaks where they'll sit and talk about the stories of love. But if somebody was to become a lover of that kind in their own family, there would be chaos, which is what happens today too. Everyone watches these movies, but in the Punjabi Sikh community especially, if somebody does what they did in the movie, then people say, hi, ek hi ho gaya, right? So the idea is, in Guru Granth Sahib, it is not an abstraction, which means it's not just an idea. So what is it? Well, he's saying, love is an ever-flowing inebriation of the deep through a Guru transmuted man. Love is the simple, inmost state of life which depends on no outward condition of life. Love has hands and feet and it works. Now this is very important, because you go to any religious community, not just Sikh community, they'll all tell you phrases like God is love and love is God, love thy neighbor. Sikhs also say that. I mean, if that was the case, even if we say 2/5 of the world is religious, or at least classify themselves to sub-classical religions, then how come there is lack of such love? Because they're only focused on the idea. That's the abstraction. And Puran Singh says the explanation or exploration of love in Guru Granth Sahib, it has hands and feet. So what he means is, it is very active, it's real. So don't just say love to people, we got to show it in your everyday living. Hands and feet means this. What you do with your hands, what you do with your feet, so how you walk, how you talk, how you deal with people, that's what defines or establishes or demonstrates love. Not just a declaration that I love you, Mom, on a Mother's Day or on a Valentine's Day. That's a declaration. If the declaration is not visual, is not demonstrated in everyday living, then you have reduced it to abstraction. So it's not just for philosophers, we do this all the time too. In divine love, we do the same thing. We'll go to Gurdwara and declare, I'm like this, but the rest of the week I might not be like that. So those are abstractions. And he's saying love is real stuff. Love is fully passionate and has the color of ruby lips that quiver with naming him. Guru Nanak is opposed to the analytical descriptions of the Great Spirit. So analyzing love is a problem, according to Guru Granth Sahib, is what Puran Singh is saying. You don't analyze love, you love. That's something we have to think about. What does that really mean then? Because mostly we will get into, well, what kind of love is this? I run a workshop for young married couples, and I jokingly now title it Lust or Deranged, because most of the marriages we say are love marriages or arranged marriages. I'm like, I don't know if we have either one left. The arranged seem very deranged and love is actually more lustful. So what is it that we need to be discovering? Well, Puran Singh is saying it's about how you practice this, how you live it. Okay. Now let's come to dictionary for a second, visual dictionary. You put in the word love on Google or dictionary.com or Webster or Merriam, whatever your favorite one is. Maybe it's neither, but none of them. But this is what you'll get. You'll get some ideas of this. Some idea of romance, some idea of affection, family, couples, marriage, passion, liking, this is what you get. Now, obviously all those feelings are captured somehow in this word love, including the one which we were saying what the philosophical or religious world or the sexual revolution world, they all use this word. In fact, the word has become so sort of popular that even the haters use this word, right? It's so crazy. It's the way that we use the word, But what they mean is when people who hate, when they are using this word, they're saying that love has become exclusive. What that means is it's only for my kind, or only the ones I like. Whereas even the very definition of the word or the etymology of the word, actually there's a problem with the etymology of this word itself. If you look at the original translations, or you go to the Greek, where the word has more sexual connotations in them. Again, I'm just sharing that with you, that when you and I, when 7 billion people on earth are using this word, we really don't know which angle they're coming from. But it sounds good. It's politically correct to use it. Even the bigots use this. They will go up in their churches, in their gurdwaras, in their mandirs, in their synagogues, in their whatever meeting centers, and they will use this word very, very freely. But if you look at their policies, if you look at what they're asking to do in their communities, what they're asking to do in their religious places of worship, it's pretty sad stuff. There is no coincidence that the 2/3 of the world doesn't have loving feelings among them. Recently, even Economist magazine came up with this idea: how do we measure which community or which nation is happy? So they came up with something called a happy index or a love index, which is more than money, obviously, right? So there is no exactness to this word, is what I'm after. Because when you try to make it exact, it becomes very mathematical, it becomes very analytical. So this is something which is more than exact stuff, and let's get into that. So let's come to the psychologists who study this. Sigmund Freud is right up there, and he's got his own theories on it, which he basically says there are different angles to it. There is a sexual element, is what he mostly went after. But then there are philosophers who have studied it. So the guy on the top of the list is Plato. This is the ideas where they're coming from. He essentially says there's an evolution in love, and you probably can relate to some of that. He says we start out at a physical level of things. At some point, it becomes intellectual and philosophical. And when there are some cases, it remains animalistic. In other cases, it transcends all of these things. And you probably have seen some people like that in your lives. That's why we say, look at this behavior. This person, we are mostly, we are supposed to be teenager plus, so I'll have to refrain from using certain vocabularies. But you know what I'm trying to say. We can see this around us, depending on how they behave with people of opposite or same sex, whatever they prefer these days. Their relationships with them will show you who's being transcending certain ideas versus where they are living. They only look at sexual orientations, or are they looking at something more? Okay. Now, in Guru Granth Sahib, and this is what I want to really go after. Basically, what I've talked about so far is that this word has all sorts of meanings. And when people are using this word, only you know why you're using it, because it's got all sorts of connotations, from philosophical to religious to actually even people who do horrible stuff, even they use this word. In Guru Granth Sahib, there are several words which loosely translate to the word love. But every single one of these words has a very different connotation. And let's look at some of them. For example, today if you listen to the word ishq, I'm sure you probably think of some Bollywood movie, right? Now, in its original idea, the word ishq, those of you are from, maybe you're familiar with Heer, one of the most celebrated poems written by Waris Shah. In its very first stanza, he invokes this word as well. Actually, the word comes from Perso-Arabic connotations, where it means that, in their connotation, it means that God is love, and when God was loving, That's when he created humanity. So they use this word exclusively to describe godly love. But today's movie and Bollywood and Lollywood, they use it very sparingly and very freely. Similarly, the word prem, pyar, snehe, preet, mohabbat, you probably have heard mohabbat a lot because Hindi movies use that a lot. Yeah. So the thing here is they are different feelings. And they all have sort of their own connotations where the word gets used. And I'll give you one example. Those of you are familiar with the poetic genre of South Asia, you probably heard the word ghazal. Recently one of the famous ghazal guys died, Jagjit Singh, so you probably know him. If you like more, well, anyway, their preferences, I think Ghulam Ali is the real ghazal guy, but that's besides the point. Now ghazal gets used for pretty much any kind of a song these days, but maybe a little bit classical. Again, in Persian parlance, where the word ghazal comes from, it was exclusively reserved for divine love. Rest of them were other sorts of poems. They had different words for them. But ghazal was when love actually had transcended to the highest levels, right? So my point is that these days when we use any of these words, we have no idea about the feelings. This is why even when we talk about our relationship, whether you're a teenager or somebody who's been married for 50 years, even they don't know what love is sometimes. Because it was arranged, they live it, and they don't know what the heck they're doing. And sometimes it's out of convenience, and other times it's just blah, waiting to die. Right? So it's applicable to everyone. In Guru Granth Sahib, the word becomes very heavy. And I'm not saying it is not heavy in other cultures or other religious scriptures, but I'm saying when the word gets invoked in Guru Granth Sahib, it actually is not even getting into the boundaries. Because Guru Granth Sahib is not about abstraction, remember? So it uses all these words to talk about human level of interaction. So Guru Granth Sahib doesn't get into this is only for spiritual love or divine love or human love, those kind of things like we do or other people are studying. Guru Granth Sahib uses all these words at all levels. So it talks, whether it's talking about love between a child or a mom, love between two entities, human entities, physical love included, love between the legendary love stories of Punjab, love between somebody Christ-like who died, on the Suli te chad gaye, on the cross. It actually uses the word at all levels. So one of the things we have to realize is, at individual level, we'll have to see how am I using this word. What can I learn from Guru Granth Sahib's ideas so it becomes less analytical but more real. So let's get into that. And I'm going to use very few Gurbani quotes just for the ideas angle, but then we'll talk about the ideas. So here is one of the ideas, and the one I want to focus on is this. I'm using this line because those of you who are familiar with sort of a traditional Sikh angles, you'll be very familiar with this line. This is repeated daily by the Sikhs, those who do Japji Sahib, for example. Now, very interesting thing here is, look how the word love gets invoked. Love is the language. Pakhya pao apar. Now, don't get upset at me, but when people ask me, have you, and I think I've shared with some of you, people, I was speaking actually somewhere in England 2 years ago, and somebody asked me, how do we know somebody's being religious? I said, that's a tough one to answer, because most religious people I come across, they're always angry. And the very first time the love gets invoked in Guru Granth Sahib, it says their language is of love. So, now this is what hands and feet meant. You want to discover love? Figure out how to talk. It's applicable to me, applicable to all of us, applicable to 7 billion people on this earth. He says language needs to be of love. Even when you're having the toughest conversation. Even when you're having, whatever. The tough conversations could be at home, they could be with a state, they could be when people are fighting for human rights issues, they could be when they're sitting in the Nazi gas chambers. It's tough. But the Sikh idea is the language needs to be of love. You might be getting ready to fight a war even, but even then the language needs to be of love. First conversation, because every fight we are having of discrimination of second or third class statuses in the world is all eventually fights are about sitting on the same table so people are treated equally and with respect and with dignity, which means you better figure out how to talk. And in Guru Granth Sahib, very first invocation of love is the language needs to be of love. So that's why it's not an abstract anymore. We better figure out how to talk nicely. And those who don't talk, those who don't learn this, in the same Bani, after a couple of stanzas, it says, the most stupid people are the ones who don't know how to talk. So we have our own idea of stupidities, but Gurbani says, those who don't know how to talk, they are. And which talk? Pakhya Pao Apar. Apar actually is infinite. Can we get training? This is love. Can you train yourself, which means it's a continuous work? Can we train ourselves to be filled with the language of love? Which means if anyone says, I've figured this out, they're lying because it's infinite. Because we all have instances, maybe 10 times a day for people like me. For some of you who have mastered it, maybe it's only once a day. But we still screw up. We don't use the right words and we still don't know how to talk nicely. So it is infinite language of love. That's the number one action Gurbani is describing, learning how to talk. Okay, now I'm going to switch gear. Well, if you're learning how to talk, then what kind of behavior will you have? So here is first, well, one behavior I picked, again from a very popular Bani called Asakivar. And I love this because, again, I just use love in a very different context. You see that? Because we commonly say this. Now, why? Because look what it's saying. It's essentially saying that those who claim to be in love, they don't see the other. So if I still see the other, so it's not, one of the things you'll notice about Gurbani is, it doesn't tell anyone that, hey, you are loving and you are kind. Nobody can tell anyone who is, only you know. But it gives you parameters, what we call in business world metrics. Here is, first metric is your conversation, is your language of love. And the second is, do you still see the other? Duja lag gaya. Duja is the other condition. European philosophers use this word, the other condition, people like Ernest Gellner. You can go study it from philosophical angles, but from Gurbani's angle, Duja is the other. And what this is saying is, how can you have that if you still have this other condition? And what is other? They are not my relatives, they are not Sikhs, they are not white, whatever the other is, right? They are not heterosexuals. Yes, we'll have to talk about this too. Other is whatever boundary you are creating. You don't have to agree with everyone. You don't have to be lovey-dovey with everyone, but you still see the other. When you see the other, every political problem in the world starts there. That's what the basis for us versus them is. There is no us versus them from Gurbani's angle. And if you are in love, you will not see that. That's what Gurbani is saying here. So who is, and then after it gives that criteria, then Guru Nanak Sahib says, actually lover is the one who doesn't see the other. So we want to know who's a lover? The one who doesn't see the other. To them, lover sees oneness. Lover sees, if you are classically religious, then you actually see God in everyone, including the one who is, it's going to sound tough, including the one who is not just bad-mouthing you, but even the one who's killing you. You might have to figure out how to fight that person, not out of hate, but because that person is doing wrong things. But you still can't say that God or whatever your idea of divinity is not in that person. It's a tough thing. It's a very tough thing. And I'll give examples of this in Sikh history, how gurus actually practice this. This is why Gurbani is not a philosophy. Philosopher doesn't have to practice things. They just have to give ideas. Gurus, when they gave an idea, they showed it in their lives, how they will do these things. Now, you probably heard this phrase a lot as well. Most of you who are attending Gurpurabs at least, you probably hear this phrase. But you generally see only one context of this phrase. The context of this whole slok, which is only 2 lines, is that there's an invitation to play the game of love. And those who play the game of love, they're not worried about consequences. And you will see this depicted in some movies, not in every movie. Although I have fun with one of them. A while ago, I was told that this Indian movie came out with the biggest budget. I think it was 6-7 years ago. It's a master, this and that. I do watch certain movies and then I end up critiquing most of them. So I watched it. It was called Devdas. It was called The Love Story. And I saw the movie. I'm like, how the heck was this a love story? They were both actually showing each other off and they want to take each other to task because it didn't work out. What this is saying is that love is where you have already, and this is not just about martyrdom, this could be about any level of love, human love included. When you have basically said, this matters most, whether it's the person, whether it is your calling, whether it is the work you are married to, whatever it is. It could be your calling or it could be the person. I'm not going to get into that because Gurbani doesn't get into that. Remember, Gurbani is not about creating delineations. It's about whatever your purpose is. If you are not committed to that cause, person, ideology, whatever you say you are in love with, and you're not willing to do anything and everything for it, then you're not in love. That's what this phrase is saying. Joto prem khilan ka jao is that. If you really want to play the game of love, are you prepared to die? One of the Persian phrases I'm remembering right now is Dar chaman haye mohabbat har kadam chun Karbala. In Islamic tradition, Karbala is where the Arabs who didn't like the Muslims, because sometimes you confuse the two, we think Arabs equals Muslims, it's not. When Islam started, Arabs were very angry at Islam. And one of the things they did was they killed grandsons of Prophet Muhammad. And Karbala is the place where they killed them. And this phrase is saying, Dar chaman haye mohabbat. Mohabbat again, that ishq, the higher idea of love. On the path of love, har kadam chun Karbala. Every step is like Karbala, which means you don't know when they're going to kill you. This is what love demands. Obviously, this love is different than I love my car. Yeah. So love here becomes whatever you are committed to. It will demand the heck out of you. This is why we have reduced the idea of love to whatever we love temporarily. Our idea of love now is very temporary phenomena because our love keeps changing, right? I love Starbucks one day, another day I like Seattle's Best. Now they're the same company, but that's besides the point. This is how we use this word. Yeah? But love actually is a constant thing. It's something you're committed to, and it's basically saying you are committed to it. So if you really are in love with even an individual, let's bring it to that level. Because most of us really have tough time understanding martyrs. I don't know why, because even today, martyr is not just a classical word. We see it in various religious traditions. But let me present it differently. We might not agree, or he might not be exactly what you like, but what do you think is happening to people like Julian Assange or people like Snowden? They're fighting a major war, right? And people are getting killed for these things. There are drone wars happening in the world. Innocent people are dying, and then they get upset and they want to blow up other things. I mean, I'm not justifying any of that. I'm just saying this kind of stuff is happening today as well. From 500 years from now, you don't know who's going to get sainthood. Because sainthood even these days, because Saint Valentine is a saint now, right? You know what a sainthood costs these days? Any idea? There's a cost. Catholic Church has put the cost to, it costs roughly about $250,000 to become a saint. We don't see history. What I'm saying is people who are doing things out of love, their idea of love, you don't know in 100 years or 200 years which one will be considered martyrs. Currently, they might look like one of the worst people on the earth because of the propaganda against them. My whole point is that when somebody is submitted to idea, person, ideology, whether you and I agree or disagree, doesn't matter. What matters is, are they committed to it? And there used to be a code on this. Even when people disagreed, they'll say, and this guy, we would say, he's got guts or she's got guts. Agree or disagree, but they're committed. So love is something of that nature in Guru Granth Sahib as well. Now, when it comes to you and me, everyday people, this sounds dandy. How do we really deal with this, because one of the words in Guru Granth Sahib for love is rang. That's the idea I'm playing with. Rang is used very poetically, to the level where those of you know Asa ki aur it says rang hasa, rang rove, chup bhi kar jaye. Rang is when you are colored with love. Love can demand anything. Love can demand your life. We just talked about it. But that's again a very romantic notion of love. Love can actually demand some small things which we don't want to do sometimes, which seem at the time small stuff. Sometimes people are ready to do big things but not small things. So it could be a habit change, it could be donation or contribution to some cause, it could be, Guru Tegh Bahadur Patsha, let me just bring Sikh history quickly into it. Can you imagine, the state has said there will be no funeral of Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib, the 9th Guru of the Sikhs. People are not doing anything. This happens, and what happens? There is this guy, he has a mansion in Delhi. What does he do? He brings whatever part of the body he could find, which was headless body of Guru Tegh Bahadur Patsha, as the history records, and he makes the whole house the funeral. That's a heck of a demand. Can you imagine that? A multimillionaire, actually in today's terms, he'll be a billionaire. Because having that big of a house in New Delhi at the time was a crazy stuff. He wasn't just a small time guy. He just said, this is so important to me. My guru needs to have a proper funeral. And he did it. He's commemorated forever. We all go to Delhi. We might not realize it, but that's one of the major gurdwaras when you go to Matha Tek there. So it's not just romantic idea of just physically dying, yeah? So it can demand anything. It has economic opportunity cost. It might even have a career opportunity cost. It might have a familial, a social relationship opportunity cost. But love obviously has opportunity cost. One of the misnomers I think is, and we can debate about it in Q&A if you are interested, but one of the things I've learned is, I think it's a complete lie when people say love is unconditional. It demands a lot, man. It demands. What I've learned through literature and learning about this is, the one you love, like if I'm loving someone, let's use it at a human level, I might be unconditional, but the one you are loving can demand anything. And this is where we mess it up. Because, even Guru Gobind Singh, he demanded a whole head of Panch Pyaras. So this is not unconditional love business here. The one who is doing the loving, you might be unconditional, but the one you are loving, you don't know what they're going to demand. And sometimes that happens even in human level of interaction as well, right? People take you, maybe they are testing you, maybe they are just messing with you, I don't know. But they do demand. Love demands a lot. And one of the hardest things it demands is changes in your lifestyle and your behavior, which we actually end up not changing at all most of the time. Okay, so love basically engages you. If you are disengaged, there's some things to consider. You're not in love. Then you might have fallen in love Hollywood style. That doesn't mean you are in love. Yeah. Now, I'm now moving a little bit too personal to the community love idea. Actually, this idea of diversity, which has become so big in the Western world now, this is being done because the laws have been changed. You have to have, like federal government says, I have to give this many contract to minorities. HEB in Texas might say, I have to do this many workshops on diversities, because the law is demanding these things. But really, when you are in love, you actually become colorblind. That's what it means. Because this is part of being, there is no other. But that's the first thing we see. We look at, these denominations, Sikh American, Irish American, African American, whatever else might be, right? Which I know has its basis in certain gangs of New York kind of stuff, or the history of slavery in this country and things of that nature. To transcend that, we do need affirmative actions. I'm not against those things. What I'm saying is, at a personal level, when we start seeing things, and the only time if you are changing your behavior is because the law is demanding it, that's a problem. When you do it because law doesn't demand it, the love in you is demanding change in behaviors, how you perceive others. Because law still demands it. Look how much racism we still have. because it's not lovingly done. It's just done out of compulsion, because law is saying you can't discriminate, but still the EOE exists because discrimination does exist, because the loving nature of people is not being brought out. Life is very paradoxical. What this is saying is love actually is a paradox. You can't say that every time the answer will be this, because you don't know what love will demand. So there are no blanket answers for everything. So what happens is when we look at great personalities and we look at sometimes, we like this thing but we don't like these things, yeah, it's going to happen. It will happen with you when you're changing your behavior. You might act one way one day, you might act another way. And sometimes people say, oh, see, there is a hypocrisy or there's a conflict in you. Not really. You're responding to that situation, that purpose. And no law, no principle is big enough to violate the human condition of love. And here's my example. Those of you know classically, Guru Nanak was asked, he told Pailana at the time, what was the test? Eat a dead corpse, a dead body. Now how will you look at that? It's an extreme example. People would have run away that this guy's gone crazy. Of course there was no dead body, but the point is that you don't know what love will demand. So which means you have to embrace paradoxes instead of looking at them as being conflicts all the time. And the difference between conflict and paradox is a beautiful thing. And conflict is the same thing, except you're only looking at two extremes of it rather than seeing how to marry the two. So those of us, here's a practical example, if I just keep looking at conflicts in my life, in American life, in Punjabi life, or whatever other lives we are part of, whichever projects you are part of, if you only see the extreme things which are not working, you will not get anywhere. You just get more frustrated. You just become a negative individual, which is absence of love. When you see, okay, we know these personalities exist, these extremism exist, how do I bring them together? That would be love. So this is called, you're trying to harmonize the paradoxes, you're trying to bring people together rather than just saying this is how it is. Now, if we embrace these ideas, these principles of Sikhi, and by the way, this is what happens in the world. You might say whatever religion you belong to, whatever philosophy you follow or don't follow, that I'm an atheist or whatever, doesn't matter what we say about ourselves. We all form our own worldview, we'll call it. And based on that worldview, if you're thinking, your every action comes out. Most of us actually don't even know what our worldview is sometimes. Sometimes you're just following what our MSNBC says or Fox News says, right? That's the fight in this country, and CNN is trying to be a referee. Last week they decided they're not going to be mainstream referee. They're going to do their own things because they were losing people. And this is what we do in life. I heard one thing from my friend. I like these two girls. Which one should I pick? Well, maybe might consider both. There are all sorts of things going on. So we're trying to figure out what works, what is consequentially better. Well, what this is saying is, if you really want to bring Sikhi in your life, one of the first things you will do is, you will actually see no difference between creator and creation. Which means if you say you love God, but you're not able to love humanity, just forget it. Because in Sikh worldview, they are one and the same. We don't have an old man sitting upstairs who's trying to figure out what to do with you and me. That's a different kind of a God. We don't have that in Sikhi. We don't have a male patriarchal idea of God. We have a very, very different idea of, in fact, we don't even use the word God. That's why in Sikh tradition, we say Ikko Wankar. It's genderless. It's creative personality. I use the word force for it, because I'm a Star Wars fan. But this is a very loving-based idea, that's why. So love-based idea in practice means, are you able to, if you just say I love God, but you're not able to bring that love in practice, then you actually have not understood what love is in Sikh tradition. Okay? Second thing is, if you say you are a loving individual, you have zero tolerance for what we now call racism and sexism. Zero tolerance, which means even in jokes in your circle, wherever you're sitting having a chart or having pizza, if there's a racist and sexist joke, you need to be that person who's going to say, hey guys, or hey gals, or hey whatever Punjabi uncles, this doesn't make sense. That's what this means. Otherwise, you've just propagated the same stuff which is creating the other condition. ਦੂਜਾ ਭਾਅ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਕਹਾਂਗੇ. If it is part of our psyche, then we are racist and sexist people, as much as we might like to deny that. We are. It's visible in our behaviors. It's visible in our policies. It's visible in the way things happen in our home, in our gurdwaras, in our communities. It is visible in how things happen in America. Look at why women are paid less for the same job as men are. There are these issues. We do, just because Barack Obama is our president doesn't mean the racism has ended. It hasn't. In fact, Tea Party has made sure it becomes even more systematic. So they don't want to allow people to vote even now, and they're introducing those legislations everywhere. Texas is party to it too as well. But anyway, my point is they're real things. Within the Sikh community, it's a real thing. We know the caste issue is big. That's racism. We all say we are not casteist. It is very visible in the way when, if nothing else, just check out when the marriages happen. They always ask this question. So don't deny it. It is part of our behavior. And if you say you believe in Sikhi and you are a loving individual, you will not entertain that. That's what this means. Zero tolerance. And zero tolerance, from engineering world or the regular world, it basically means no, zero entertainment. You're not going to even consider it. And we are all considering this. So that tells us how much loving we are then. Yeah. Eventually, it has other ideas built into it, but I'll skip that. But if you have zero tolerance for racism, sexism, what are the world problems? World problems are basically on economic and political rights. From a Sikh angle, a loving individual establishes equal political and economic rights. And if we are not doing it, we actually have not understood what love is, because we are not ready to give opportunities to, what's generally called third world countries, equal rights. Even, I'm going to bring it to economists, because everything is economy these days. And economy is what? We have abundance actually in the world. But even then, there are people hungry in this world. We're in 21st century, 2014. I don't know what the heck we are waiting for. Currently, this week, in Africa, in 3 nations, people are still being killed and nobody gives a damn, because that country is not important for the economies of the world right now. So we definitely, these are some real issues. And the loving nature will demand we actually ask these tough questions. Now let me come to the human angle, because we got a lot of teenagers here. Okay, they're like, whatever this uncle is talking about, he needs to talk a little bit more about, what I'm interested in. So let's talk about it. What is that old song? Let's talk about sex, baby. Is it? I'm not going to get into that explicitly, but here is an element of that. Let's talk about the human level. Now I'm introducing this slide here on purpose. You guys have probably seen it, but those of you who haven't. There are 5 legendary love stories of Punjab. And they are love stories at a human level. The number 1 interpreter of Sikh thought at the time of Guru Arjan is Bhai Gurdas. This body is in his vara. This body is something which is authenticated by the Guru, and Sikhs sing it. They might not love to talk about it, but we definitely sing it once in a while. Now this is invoking human love. Because those of you who know this, I grew up, from at the age of 12 onwards, I grew up in this country. I didn't know what Laila Majnu was. I didn't know what Sassi Punnu was. I didn't know who Heer Ranja was. So at some point, the nerd in me bought a book called, Legendary Love Stories of Punjab. And I read them. And that's, I'm like, this is interesting. Because whenever you look at conservative cultures, which includes Punjabi Sikhs, they don't like to talk about this stuff. Definitely not the religious people, because they're too afraid you might become one of these people. Because when you are in love, you're actually becoming free. You don't give a hoot about the world. As we say in today's vocabulary, you're on cloud 9, right? People who are in love, they have excitement in their lives. People who are not in love, they're always complaining and bickering. They're always negative. Whether they're religious or not doesn't matter. Yeah. So being in love, even at a human level, between the lovers at a physical level, it's celebrated in Sikh tradition. Remember, Eastern and Western world has traditions where they consider it, you will become somehow less spiritual, even when you get married. So they can't even entertain this idea. Sikhi embraced this. I know it's not commonly talked about these days, but we embraced it. The only thing missing here is, there is one very famous legendary love story is of Sahiba and Mirza. So, when I read that book, I'm like, Pai Gurdas doesn't mention that love story. And I'm a little bit old, but I heard Safri boys singing about that. Pravato Yar Maradita, those of you know the story. And so I was wondering why that story is not included in here. Because in that love story, it was temporary phenomena. It became like Devdas, where one of the lovers got the other lover murdered by her brothers. And the rest of these, they wanted to be together. They obviously were at a human level, but at a human level it became godly level because it was more than temporary phenomena. And in most cases they died. And that's the final cost of love, isn't it? It can demand your life. This is celebrated and embraced in Sikh culture. So when our people, we should really encouraging people to be loving, including in choosing their partners of life. We should be encouraging that, not telling people not to talk to each other, as some of the conservative folks do. I mean, there needs to be, I'm not going to get too much into it, but my whole point here is that a human level of love, the celebrated love stories, India doesn't have love stories. They're all Punjabi. What does that tell you? They're all from Punjab. So there is some Punjabi spirit which we have captured and celebrated in Sikh traditions. They can't find them. They have to keep using these stories in Indian movies too. They find little bits and pieces of other stuff, maybe some divine stuff, a human level, because love, Punjabi ਵਿੱਚ एक word ਹੈਗਾ ਜੁਰਤ. ਪਿਆਰ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਵੀ ਜੁਰਤ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ. ਉੱਥੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਕੁੜੀ ਵੀ ਭਜਾਣੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਜੁਰਤ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ. Mind na karyo, but this is the word, right? This is how things are. To do anything in love, you gotta have that jurrat. Now imagine the level of love, and this is the last line here. What Pai Gurdas is writing is, if you are that intense as Heer was with Ranja or Ranja was with Heer, can you become that intense with the Guru? Then you will know what love is. Otherwise, you're just analyzing and talking about it. So intensity of love, when it is being exemplified, examples are being looked at. They're finding only at the human love stories of Punjab. This is a very powerful message. So they think about this. This is, how are we going to embrace this in 2014? This is a question. What love stories should we be talking about here? Let me actually introduce something political here. Don't mind me doing this. But when are we going to talk about, even if you disagree with him, remember, it doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with somebody's politics. Are you ready to embrace Bhai Satwant Singh and his love story, how he gets married in jail while they're putting him in jail in 1980s? That's a different kind of a love story. How he gets married. Have we even looked at the girl who married him? So it still continues. But we just don't talk about it because we are too afraid. And you know why we are afraid? You and I are afraid कि साढ़े न्याणे भी इदां दे ना बन जान. Because love can do some, love becomes, if you are a powerful lover of any kind, I'm not going to say just spiritual or just political or just human, any kind of a powerful lover, world doesn't like you at the time. But slowly when you become successful, then they salute you and you become a case study. It takes a while though. So this is the challenge. Love is not a thing which we are able to all do, obviously, right? So those who are able to do it, they are able to go places. And this is where it's one of the few words in both in Indic languages, in English, which is both a noun as well as a verb. All of you understand the noun part. Because that's the feeling. We all have the feelings, right? They come and go. And if you watch a particular movie, you get the feeling as well. But it leaves, when something happens. But the verb part is the one which most of us, overwhelming majority of the world forgets. The verb part of love is you have to do something. It's an active verb. Gurbani invokes it, Jin Prem Kiyo, not Filo. We all feel it. But to love, you got to do certain things. So there's one way to look at it. The noun part is the declaration, I love you, which we do pretty regularly, I think. Some men have tough time saying it though. But the reality, the way it becomes verb is I'm ready for change because I'm in love with you. You see how one is a declaration, other demands a commitment? Okay. Idea is, some of us are very passionate about Punjab. Ye kar do ji, wo kar do, phate chak do, inu maar do, ye kar do. Well, what are you doing? Even at an economic level, why don't you go adopt your own village first? Why don't you just adopt 10 kids of the survivors of 84? That's the difference. Noun part, we are all very used to now. The verb part demands commitment. Remember, this is the difference. At a human level, at a community level, at a declaration level, we all say, Hanji, nobody will say don't support a good cause. We all support a good cause. Really, when you support it, you give your time, your intellect, and money for it. That's what it means. So whether you like PETA, I'm not going to decide whether it's for you, or you like Doctors Without Borders, or you like Insaf, you got to give your time, money, and intellect. That's what it means. Otherwise, you're not in love. That's what it's saying. So there's a personal level, there's a event level, and there's a reality of the world level. So essentially, this is what M. Scott Peck used to say. Those of you who have read Road Less Traveled. He says, love is not just a feeling. It is an act of will. So we all have the feelings, and we all get them from time to time. But that act of will, which means you have to do some things, that part is a problem. We are not able to make, the active verb in love is missing for most of us. And this is where one of my favorite poems is this in Punjabi, written by Bhai Veer Singh. And he describes this beautifully. Because people who are in love, they are in longing, they have a pain. I don't know, I think there are several teenagers here, but even some young adults and some young married. When you are in love, man, you want to just keep talking to that person. Now the phone is cheap. Earlier than it used to have long plans, unlimited minutes, and they sometimes used to get very expensive, right? But that's a cost, that's opportunity cost, right? We were talking about that. And what this is saying is, if you feel it here, you feel it in your gut, Seene khich jinane khadi yokar aram nahi bende. You can apply this to any level of khich, any level of separation, any level of pain. He says those who have these pangs of love in them, they don't sit idle. They're very active. So whether you're trying to find a spouse, or a girlfriend, or a boyfriend, or a cause, or trying to do something for a community, if you are just declaring, you're sitting idle, it ain't gonna happen. It's like Prithpal and I were joking about Super Bowl on the phone. I asked him, I'm like, what happened? Because I didn't get a chance to watch much of it this year. I saw some parts of Super Bowl. He's like, they just didn't show up. And what that means is, physically showing up is half the work. You can say that's the noun part. But if you don't go there and perform, which is doing things, you're not showing up, which is the mental showing up or a behavioral showing up. So you could be practicing all along, you have a right idea of what you're going to say when you meet this girl or a guy or whatever. So that's showing up, maybe half of it. And you can apply this to community things, you can apply this to worldly things. The noun part is very, very clear to most of us. Even for our physical weddings, the noun part is clear. You will see every decoration, every card, everything worked out properly. But most of the time, the whole idea of Anand Karaj is lost because we don't show up mentally. It's all the physical noun part, right? Noun is physical stuff. It's important, don't misunderstand me. If you don't have that in you, then you're not going anywhere. But it doesn't stop there. There's a verb part, which is actually showing up and performing, doing things. Okay, so quick exercise before we wrap this up. If I were to ask you guys to plot yourself on this graph, just do it mentally. What do you say you are in terms of love, 1 through 5, and what do you say your willingness to change in terms of 1 to 5? Just rate yourself, do you give 2 for love or 4 for change for yourself? Whatever it is, do it for yourself. You're going to end up with some sort of a line. Well, one of the things is most of us do this. From Gurbani's angle, this line's going to be this. So somewhere in there we are lying to ourselves. Love can demand anything from you. So if you say you are in love, but you're closed-minded, it ain't love, because you don't know what's going to demand. And if you say you're open-minded, but you're not in love, it ain't going to happen either. The point of this graph is love and openness to change are directly proportional. Otherwise, you might be in a quote-unquote marriage of convenience, both physical marriage or idea marriage or organizational marriage or whatever else might be. Love demands complete open-mindedness. You don't know what's going to ask you to do. And that's why it fails most of the time. The relationships fail, organizations fail when these kind of challenges come up, because unexpected, and you're not prepared, and you're not open to it. Then you just come up with excuses and things get lost. Okay. So how can we apply all this in our lives today? Let me just now divide this up into 3-4 areas. Spiritually, love basically is saying, you're not waiting for anyone to tell you how to have your relationship with the divine. If you're waiting for somebody who's going to come tell you, then you basically have created a transaction. And love is not about transactions. Most of us, in the religious capacities, it's a big business. This is the biggest business in the world. Non-profit world in America is now the 7th largest business. All churches are registered non-profit. In fact, they don't even have to file taxes. That's why churches are getting bigger and bigger, including gurdwaras. Because there is zero accountability there. Even government is not asking. There are legislations being proposed now that we need to start asking people what they're doing with it. Why am I sharing this? Because they all claim to help you develop a relationship with God. But it is not happening. It didn't happen 150 years ago. The gurdwaras, the synagogues, the temples, the churches, you look at any religious community's internal report, they're all losing memberships. So obviously, whatever they're doing is not out of love. Remember the action part? They're all declaring God on Sundays as love, but in their action, it's just not visible. So what I'm saying is, for all of you, if you really want a relationship, just do it yourself. Don't wait for some religious personality or institution to tell you how to do it. And political level, love means you really want equal representation rights for people. Remember, it has zero tolerance for racism and sexism. This is what the chaos in the world is about. People don't want to share. People don't want to give rights to everyone. This doesn't mean we are saying, this is like a communism where everyone gets exactly same shares. No, this is saying everyone has access to the same things. Even access is being denied. This is the World Global Risk Report of 2012 said this is number one problem, the geopolitical realities. Last week, Reporters Without Borders put out right to information in the world. They put out a graph where they're showing most of the world actually is in a what they call bad situation or very bad situation in terms of rights to access to information. Yeah, it's pretty bad out there. Socially, do you treat people with dignity and respect? That's the question. Whether you like them or not is not the issue. So socially, figure that out. What they eat, what they wear, what they drink, they might not to be what your call is, what your protocol is, what your religious law is, but do you still treat them with dignity and respect? That's the question socially. And economically, it's about establishing parities, which essentially mean there are, even in this country, let me use American example here. If you plot a graph from 1945 to 2005, there's a disappearing middle class in this country. The middle class actually, with the rate of inflation, has been getting less and less, whereas the 99% opposite, which is the 1%ers in this country, have become what they call ultra rich. So plutocrats is the term for them. And it has happened by design. It hasn't happened because they are more smart. For example, NFL, all of you are familiar with? Taxpayers pay to build stadiums. Owners keep all the profits. Legally, NFL is a non-profit organization. It has absolutely zero zero taxation for them, with a special act of Congress, US Congress, so they have exemption from antitrust laws in this country. This is what happens even here. This is what I mean by, in love you will never do that you are actually doing it by design, not because you're an entrepreneur. I know we use that term, independent, entrepreneurship, freedom, but those are buzzwords. I'm giving you the reality even for NFL. This is what's going on, even in this country. Taxpayers pay for it, owners keep the money, and it is exempted from taxation, and it is exempted from antitrust laws in this country. So it definitely happens. Another example of this will be the US members of Congress, they have exemption from insider trading. That's why they always make the money. They sit in the same committee where they find out who's going to make the money. It's true, it's happening here in this country as well. So there are serious problems of this nature, and again the love-based idea will say this is not acceptable. There should be equal access, and then it's your effort, luck, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Quick examples of this will be, social level of example will be Guru Nanak, his relationship with his sister. Why am I sharing this? Because in today's Punjabi culture, the idea of love is, it's still bounded by social customs. Girls are treated differently even today. People will say that ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੁੜੀ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਦਾ ਪਾਣੀ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੀਂਦੇ. And Guru Nanak stays with his married sisters not for 1 day or 2 days, for months. He didn't give a damn about social customs. Love doesn't give a damn about social customs. That's the idea. Because social customs come and go, they keep changing. What's legal and illegal keeps changing. It was illegal for LGBTQ community to serve in the military, now it's not. Love doesn't look at those things. Love looks at what drives you, what is the reason why you are doing these things. Guru Hargobind Singh and Paide Khan, Guru Hargobind Padsha, why am I sharing this? They're childhood friends. Just imagine this. When they're adults, they're at opposite sides of army. Paide Khan had joined the Mughals. They meet up in battlefield. Their job is to kill each other. This is 350 years ago or so? 400 maybe? They come across each other. Paide Khan tries once, he misses. Second time he tries, he misses. Third time Guru Hargobind Pasha says, let me show you how it's done. That's how the wars are. But the more important part is, obviously, his head gets cut off. Guru Hargobind Sahib gets off his horse, picks Paide Khan up in his arms. He says, it's time for you to do your last rites according to Islamic tradition. Can you imagine the level of sensitivity it demands to be able to do justice at all levels? And then Paide Khan looks at him and says, I don't need to do it. I'm looking at you. This is victory at love level. So your job might be to do certain things. You still cannot be operating in hate and love. And even when something has happened, how you behave, there are codes. Just like in UN, there are conventions, there are Geneva Conventions. Countries become signatories to it, but even then they keep violating them. They keep violating women. You keep using rape as a way to defeat the other parties. This is happening even today. You know that. Sikhs are very familiar with this. Look what's been going on for the last 30 years with us, with the tortures. But this is happening worldwide. And what this powerful narrative of Guru Hargobind shows is, what you have to do at a particular point in time, it's still, even if it's a battlefield, it cannot be driven out of hatred. It still has to be love-based. Balbir Kaur, I mentioned, this is a very political thing, 100 years ago. Young woman who is going to a morcha to free a Gurdwara because Gurdwara was occupied by British India. They want to free their Gurdwara. She joins a Jatha of martyrs. She gets killed, her son gets killed. Why am I sharing this? Because today, we have an issue with women doing certain things in our community. We never used to have these issues. And the longer narrative is available. You guys can read up on Google and other places. The reason I'm sharing this is because the Jathedar at the time told her, you can't go, you're a woman, about 100 years ago. And she looked at Jathedar and said, when I took Amrit, you told me I was a daughter of the same Guru Gobind Singh and same Mata Sahib Kaur. Well, how come you are excluding me today? He had no option, he changed. So Jathedar had some sense back then. Today you know where they are. Yeah. So 100 years ago, we were progressive community. 400 years ago, we were progressive community. These days we are regressive because our idea of love is out there. Politically correct version is floating, not the one which is based out of ideas of Guru Granth Sahib. So what are the takeaways? Well, the takeaways is at your personal level, become one yourself first. Love basically is about oneness. When you yourself are connected, you will find the right kind of a boyfriend, girlfriend, business partner, community partner. That's the idea. If you yourself don't know what you're looking for, you yourself are a split personality, Gurbani says, Bio beej pat le gaye ab kyun ugve dal. A split seed cannot grow. Only a connected, a non-split thing grows. So that do it for yourself. Love yourself, not in the Madonna way, but in my, so sometimes we are too hard on ourselves. I don't like the way I look, I don't like the way where I was born, we have so many issues. You got to love, because there is a divine in you. Gurbani says, Vaheguru, the Eko the oneness is within you, and you got to bring it out. At a family level, I know it's hard because we are we are bombarded with either becoming a tiger mom or chittar as your yar, as your parents taught you in Punjabi tradition. We don't know which way the parenting goes. Really, from Gurbani's angle, are you able to treat not just your siblings, but your offsprings? It's very demanding. It's very frustrating, I know. But love-based idea will be, can your offsprings become also your fellow travelers? What did it take for Guru Gobind Singh to say to his dad, who was a guru as well, that you're the best man to die for this country? If your son or daughter comes and says this to you, they'll probably get a slap. But that's our tradition. What kind of parenting was that? That Guru, at the same level as a Guru, as a dad, Guru Gobind Singh is a son, but he's an equal partner. Equal partners are able to say things of that nature. That's what we have to think about. Because it's very love-based. It wasn't a fear-based that I'm your dad and I'm the Guru, I'm the Jathedar. That's how we talk. Okay. Third thing is community. At a Sikh community level is what I'm saying. We basically actually don't follow Guru's wisdom, which means we don't follow Gurmat at all. We are following the biggest funder or the most influential person or the state. Simply put, that's where we are. Nobody looks at how to solve an issue based on Gurbani these days. So of course, that's takeaway is you're a community activist, look at that stuff. And at a societal level, which is a Sarbatta Pala level, love basically says since there is no difference between creator and creation, you're actually serving anything and everything. You're just not looking at the demarcations we have created. What do all these things mean in terms of action? You can see eventually everything is about changing policies, guys. Even Pope has written this now. The new Pope, if you read up what he put out last October, I got a chance to finally read his book. Ignore what he has written about because that's part of their religion, conversions. If you ignore that, if you read, I think pages 37 through 45, it's available for free on the web. He's talking about the economic situation in the world, the social situation in the world, and he's got great ideas. Yeah, Catholic Church, which is so conservative, and he's written even that the theologians are now talking about it in America, that if the religion has to survive, they better adopt social justice as part of their spirituality. Among Sikhs, in Sikhi, we were given this from day one. So they are adopting it, we are leaving it. This is the problem. Apna banda kehanda sirf na bani padho. Just do your Simran, remember God, everything will be great. No. That's declaration. Remembering God and reading Bani, if it's not translatable into action to change policies in this world, it's not going anywhere. Okay, my last slide, and I'll leave it with this, and then you guys can shoot your cues. We all feel love, right? What Gurbani says is, does your mind feel the love? And this is where 95% of Gurbani talks about mind. And this is Guru Sahib saying, Mai mere man ki preet. My mind feel. Guru Granth Sahib is full of this. Chavi man chao paya pragam sunaya. Our problem is that at a human level, our mind never feels happy, our mind never feels excitement, mind doesn't feel mind is what? It's all about thought. It's about changing behaviors. It's all about how you treat someone, that dignity, respect ideas. And if that happens, if you are in love, then what you do, what your creed is, what you daily do, all these things basically become very divine. So how do you get your mind excited? How does your mind feel love? This is a question we have to think about, which all has to do with showing up mentally. We are physically showing up, mentally showing up demands a lot of changes. Yeah. And this is where, and people who mentally have this kind of a change at a love level, then you know the history of the world is, and you can listen to Nusrat and he sings it better than I can explain, where he says, Chamda lutaya ishq ne, gulla lutaya ishq ne. People who are really in love, then they are prepared for anything. Because they are mentally prepared. Those of us who are not mentally prepared, even when we love somebody at a human level, we like, even if your parents will say, chhad pare, and you leave. Because they'll come up with some constructed social norm, you eventually will buy into it and you leave your love. Very few don't, and they take the right pange then. So it is, you better believe it, Sikhi is about taking pange at every level. But they're mindful pange. Your mind is full of love, mind is full of mentally showing up ideas, and that's what creates your worldview. Your worldview creates how you operate in love in daily lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemda Singh, for that enlightening presentation on multiple levels: personal, public, community, family. So we have 15 minutes left for time for Q&As. So I encourage audience members to ask questions on any level. 15 minutes. Questions? Speaking to this slide.
So could you please talk a little more about love and rationality? Is there any inherent conflict?
Excellent question. Thank you for asking that. I think I initially touched upon it. There are various you can say philosophical explanations of love, and that's where the rational thought comes in. Plato's is the one I picked to talk about, but other people have written about it as well. From a Gurbani's angle, remember I mentioned that we actually don't see a conflict. So to us, it is not just about feeling or just about mindfulness. We are trying to marry the two, because the feeling element, Gurbani says the divinity in you, the love in you is already given to you when you come into this world. So this is very, very important, because this is a departure from other world traditions. Other world traditions, some Christian traditions and some Indic traditions believe you did something wrong, that's why you are here. Gurbani says you are here because you are a product of divine love, divine gift. Now the problem is we lose that love and the gift element, and this is where Gurbani is saying become mindful of that. Recognize your own worth. And the one way to, and then he gives you explanations on how do you recognize that. He says change your behavior. That's mindfulness. That's rationality also. Now that's one way to, one answer I have. The second thing I want to mention is, remember this is not an abstraction. So this is, invitation in Gurbani is to play the game of love. Which means if you are only deciding things rationally, mind is a very powerful thing. It will justify not doing anything. And we know that. You can construct a very good SWOT analysis why you shouldn't do it. And Guru Nanak's words are, people who only look at pluses and minuses, which means liabilities and assets, right? Changa changa kar manna, manda manda hoye, ashak ehin akhiye je lekhe vartes hoye. So Guru Granth Sahib explicitly records this. Guru Nanak Sahib says lovers are not the ones who only measure things in positives and negatives. The real lovers are the ones who go beyond consequences. So how do I interpret that for myself? Practically, I'm an engineering background guy, so you know how dry and nerdy people they are. And that's why everyone needs to do some humanities degree too, People should always read art, literature, film, read novels. They're so important. So the way I look at this is, how we do analysis? We do analysis because you want to make sure you have done your homework. Even just for basic decisions, right? But at the end of the day, you go with your principled stance. And the analysis is there only just to support it. Now in case of love, because this is not a project, this is your life experience now you're carrying. So if you are out of fear, you make decisions. That's what it will mean. Fear is pluses and minuses. And you're looking for how do you create more negatives So we will not do this, or your child will not do it, your organization won't do it. That's how we operate. But this is where Gurbani says, stop doing that. When you have enough experience, you're living a life, take principled decisions and don't worry about consequences. There will be consequences. That doesn't mean everything will be hunky-dory. It's not going to be hunky-dory. We just talked about it. People who love, there are great costs. I would submit to you, here is my bias, that Snowden is a great patriot, using that word in a non-Tea Party way. Why? Because he is really concerned about America to the level where he has betted everything he has done. Because he wants to make sure the vision of America remains what the founding fathers thought it to be. This is a place, where secrecy should be, there should be no secrecy in the society. This is what America was founded on. We ran away from the Europeans who were trying to do that. So there are always consequences. Physical level of love, community level of work, political level of work, religious level of work. There are persecutions because of these things. But loving decisions do not look at consequences. Hanji.
Let's get some more questions. Questions?
It's an excellent question. Now you have asked a how question. I say this, how questions are always very tough to answer. What and why are easy to answer because they're trivial, right? So let me come back to Gurbani here. In Gurbani, the idea of finding strength is this idea of oneness again. Reason we don't have strengths, in fact, let me invoke Gurbani words here. Because you used heart and mind, which is what we are used to. Gurbani uses the word, phrases like surt. It will use phrases like live. And these are important because, right now we have a linguistic bind. We are using English words and they are derived out of particular connotations and particular ideologies. Gurbani's vocabulary, where it uses words like live, words like sidak, words like surat, they're actually integration of thinking and feeling. The problem is, remember paradoxes, we look at things in conflict. Gurbani doesn't look at things in conflict. It says, how do you become an integrated personality, integrated individual, where you're not the heart is not finding the mind and mind is not fighting the heart. Rather, they are in sync. In fact, Baba Faridji then describes a mature individual as the one where there is a synchronization of what you think and what you do, which is heart and mind kind of an idea. Hope that helps. So strength is, instead of them fighting to control your body, make them allies, not the two conflicts or paradoxes.
Let's get a few more questions.
I
Like language, if you don't use the right attitude and finding you are other. So how can you separate them with the language?
I'm not disagreeing with you. What I maybe didn't explain it properly, limitations of articulating certain things. What basically we're saying is that a lot of the things are seen in how we operate. So if I just declare I love my wife, let me use my example. If I keep saying to Gurpreet, I love you, and on our anniversary or Valentine's Day, or when I feel like doing a PDA, things of that nature. But if I don't respectfully talk to her, then I actually don't love her. That's what I was saying. So one remains just a declaration, other one requires me, people you love, and now that's a wife example. Now if I'm expanding in a Plato idea, which is also Gurbani's idea, now expand that to community. I come across an individual who hates me. How do I respond to that individual? Can I do it lovingly? That will be love then. So it's more not just the nomenclature, it's more about developing your behavior. Thank you.
Questions? We heard from young folks. You must be still contemplating the last slide he showed. Like, Gyani ji, ये वाला शब्द आया कर कोई बात.
maybe I can ask for the type of young people who may, some are teenagers who may be listening to you, may think that it has a pre-license age to have relationships. How do you reconcile their idea, parents' idea, love or having a partner?
Yeah, well, I think I answered that already, but if you want more explicit answer, then here it is. You know, parents' idea of lot of Sikhi is totally messed up. Yeah, let's admit that. We actually don't know. Now let me apply that to marriage, and I'm just gonna, and I have my own set of data for it. I can actually show it to you. Our parents run our institution. Look how greatly they're run. So they actually have no idea. I'm being sarcastic. They have very little idea. Youngsters also don't have an idea. So I'm not just, so we have what we will say a lack of understanding of Sikh worldview. So we'll apply that to marriages as well. You know, most of the marriages in the Punjabi Sikh world, they are not great marriages. So why should they take your advice on how they should get married? Either show them something, demonstrate it, or let them explore. Now, that's my answer to parents. Now, what will I say to youngsters? You know, we need to be relevant to the times we live in. And the relevancy doesn't mean that we violate certain principles and fundamentals of our own, you know, whatever you are. So we need to again come back to what Gurbani says. Become mindful about your actions. If you want to date, I mean, date is date. You know, उन्होंने खजूरा खानी है तो सी औखे हो रहे हो. I'm just kidding. So,
The folks aren't laughing on that one.
I know, but the point is, it's a linguistic joke, Punjabi and English mixing. But anyway, the point here is, you know, dating, not dating, premarital sex, extramarital sex. I'm going to bring all of that together, because the issue is relationship. We should be, if parents are that worried, we should have conversations about how do we have healthy relationships. And start out in your own home first. Have a healthy relationship with your child. And I can guarantee you, if you're able to do that, they'll figure out how to have a healthy relationship with whoever they're looking for in life. So it's not about don't do this or do this. That's a bad preacher. That's not a Sikhi model. Yeah, we already have enough of that. We have it in Sikrat Maryada. You can go through it. What we really need to do is inspire people, make them ki man de vich preet upje. And people who are excited, people who are developed, you know, then most probably they'll make the right choices. In the absence of that, it becomes a conflict. Just like an internal conflict within us, we have external conflicts. Do this or don't do this. So I encourage all the youngsters to, you know, people who are teenagers. I mean, the adults sitting here, you know your college days. Everyone wanted to be Shiv Kumar Batalvi. You know, those of you are from Punjab. We all go through those phases. Here, you know, people, we all go through phases as well. Help people become aware individuals, loving individuals, a dignity and respect idea. And if we work on those, which are behaviors, what they do in their life, you won't have to tell them. You actually would have trained them, and we would have been a greater companion in their own journey. Otherwise, there is disagreement on everything else. So healthy relationships, we should go after that. People who are aware, they know what to do.
I'll add a side note to that. You know, when Chote Sajjade were with Mata Gujri, the Sakhis we have heard, nowhere in my childhood recollection I've heard a Sakhi where Mata Gujri was saying, oh, you're going to be tortured and this. When they answer, they ask you this question, say this. When they ask you this, say this. Only thing we hear in Sakhi is, she said, just remember who you are, where you came from, who your father was, who your parents are. So that is the beauty of the conversation, and that's the conversation it needs to be. I'm saving it. I'm trying to hope that somebody has, you know, guts to ask a young person to ask a question. But I know it's hard enough all the time. We'll take one last question. Anybody else? Anybody else? I'll ask the last question if nobody wants to. Can you recommend some resources for folks who are interested in how to explore these ideas more? Most importantly, how to work on themselves.
Yeah, I think the self-help industry is loaded with that kind of thing, so I don't have any particular recommendation, but I'm going to come back to Gurbani's ideas because I was here to provide a Sikh angle to these things, right? In the contemporary sort of a format, because you are also in the marketplace. We are all in the marketplace. There's so many ideas coming to us. And most of the ideas which come to us, they actually don't come from Sikh angle, even if they're coming from our own community. Number one thing, if I can just say with you, the number one resources Sikhs have is Guru Granth Sahib. You know, and America has to decide certain things. They are court battles, they are legislative battles. What's the number one source they have? It's all about how you interpret the Constitution. And the number one source we have, every Sikh agrees, we actually don't utilize. Just imagine if you were able to understand some of that. So I would say, try to find some shabads, and there are tools available for that, which talk about love. And see how the love is explored in Gurbani. And I've just shared you just some glimpses, some samples of that. And the idea is very, very powerful. It actually does not get into what we get into, you know, what is allowed and what is not allowed. It doesn't get into, it actually says, at the end of the day, if you are lustful, that's the problem. That's what Gurbani says. Think about that. So it is actually asking us to go back to our original source. Our original source is that every single person on this earth is divine. If you felt divine, what you do to your own body, which means you will love yourself. What you do to others when you come across with them, the ones you want to have relationships with them, even at a physical level, it'll be very, very different. Guru Granth Sahib is asking us to think about it. Think about what you are doing to people who are close to you, people who you want to have passionate relationships with, people who are living in this global village of 7 billion people. That's what Guru Granth Sahib is after. I highly recommend all of you to learn language. I'll tell you that's the number one thing you can do for yourself, because this is the age of pundits, and they're not only in India. They're sitting on Wall Street, and they're sitting on YouTube channels, and they're sitting everywhere. In the age of pundits, everyone is spinning things because they know most people don't read the original stuff. So I recommend, whether you like Buddhist thought, give some thought, read Thampad. You like Sikh thought, read Guru Granth Sahib. You like Christian thought, look at a couple of versions of Bibles. You got to start going to some sources. You like Plato, don't just read a commentary on it. Read what he has to say. Read what Freud has to say. This is what work requires. And love requires a lot. I already said that to you guys. So my number one thing is become more aware. And love, please do not reduce this to analysis. It's essentially a developed person. Idea of love in Sikhi is, it's a continuously you're developing yourself to become more divine-like. So whatever your idea of divinity is, call it God, call it Nirvana, call it whatever you want to. Gurbani calls it Ekvankar, the oneness. Use that idea, which is synonymous with love, to become a powerful individual. And powerful not in a power-hungry sense, but powerful in a loving sense. Then nothing can move you. You won't worry about customs. Like I said, the customs will test you, parents will test you, community will test you. At some point, if you actually stick to it, you will be the case study they'll write about. And you can do that at a human level, you can do it at a community level, you can do it at a global level. It's all up to you. You are divine. Just keep remembering, this is Sikhi's message. You are divine. Treat yourself as you are a sovereign, divine individual. You are part of God, quote unquote. Number one source for Sikhs is Guru Granth Sahib. Learn its language. But I'm essentially saying you superimpose that, learn to do things, get your hand and feet dirty when you want to be in love. Don't just send greeting cards. Ajkal wo bhi saukhe nahi, you just send e-greeting cards. It just takes a click. Love demands more than a click. It might start out as a click. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for coming on your Saturday, and hopefully I gave you a few things to think about. Obviously, my disclaimer at every talk is don't believe anything I've told you. And the reason for that is, I could be one of those pundits who's taking you for a ride. You don't know what my agenda is. So remember, love is not just a feeling. So go get your hands and feet dirty. Whatever you love, whoever you love, you got to do things for them or it or whatever the cause might be. That's what love is. Which means if you really love, if you like somebody, if you really, really like somebody, at some point you might even love somebody, right? That's how it works. What is the number one thing, and I'm going to leave it at this. What's the number one thing you do when you really like somebody? I'm putting you on spot, I know. What's the number one thing you do when you forget religion and this big stuff, at a personal level? What is the number one thing you do when you really, really like somebody? Anything for them is again out there. But what do you really do? You want to help her? You spend time with them. Simple as that. Love demands you to do things. And at our level, it demands time. The gifts come and go. If you don't give time, relationships end. It happens everything it's applicable. You can apply it between parents and children. You can apply it between, physical human love. You can apply between divine love and your love. If you don't give it time, it ain't going anywhere. So this works everywhere. This is how it works with God as well. Yep. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Just some concluding remarks. Thank you for this meeting. So I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. Something unique on a day after Valentine's Day. I really hope you guys go out and play this game of love. So if you're liking this seminar or you have ideas about what other topics there should be, free for conversations like this, there is a testimonial sheet. Please, I encourage you to put your comments down on here. I'll give this to Harpreet. There's some pens over here. Before you go, put your thoughts down here so we can get an idea of how you felt. And please check out Sikhi Institute's website, sikhi.org. A lot of great things happening there. A lot of new Gravani books going to come out later this year. And really new way of really looking into reflection and learning about this. I also want to thank a few individuals. One, Steve Singh-Matu, here was giving us his services, providing video recording as well as live feed on the radio. Thank you so much. He always does that for us. I want to recognize La Quinta, especially for Mr. Singapore. Without him, this seminar could not have happened. Thank you so much. And all your local gift companies with us. Ireland Group, Richardson Group, Ulis, as well as the Caljo. They are the sponsors of this event. So if you like this event, or if you want to have more events like this, not just for Sikh Research Institute, if you want learning environment, which don't necessarily get out of Gurdwara because of various reasons, there's a lot of demands, and they're willing to do it. They want to do it. So give input to
सके बचानी